All right. It's Wednesday night. Hopefully you guys are having a good week. Lots of fun stuff happening out there in the market. Well, it's kind of red, so that part's not fun. But we got a lot to talk about tonight. Different things shaking, moving. So we'll jump into that. Talk about the macro, about regulations, where that's at, and all of the other things that are impacting your potential investments in your portfolio when it comes to crypto. Happy to jump into tax, estate planning, all the other fun stuff that we do at Digital Ascension Group. And I'll just go ahead and start with my disclaimer because it came to my mind. Everything here is for entertainment and educational purposes. Nothing should be considered financial advice. You should always seek counsel from a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. If you need a licensed financial advisor, you can always work with Digital Ascension Group. We have people that are licensed with 65, 63, 7, 66. I think we have a 24 and a 3 also. So lots of licenses over there on that side of the business. And any of the things that I share are my opinions. They're not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or any of its subsidiaries. So now that that's out the way, we can jump into all the fun stuff when it comes to the macro and everything else. Really haven't had a ton of time to go out on Twitter today and see everything that's going on out there. I don't think that there was anything huge that happened in the market. We have seen some liquidity providers partner with Ripple here recently, which is a good deal. They had another one, I think, come out today. Earlier in the week, 200 million being put with them to be able to provide liquidity or cross-margin assets over there at Ripple Prime. I believe that was another 200 million that was placed with them today. You got the Jack McDonald. He was on a podcast here recently with Rachel Wolfson. If you guys haven't checked that out, I would encourage you to go do so. Rachel puts out awesome content. Shout out to her. She was nice enough to invite me to a polo event in Miami while I was still there, but unfortunately wasn't able to attend. She's at all the conferences. I actually ran into Eleanor Terrett the other day too. She was up there or out there in Bermuda. Didn't get to talk. She said hi as she passed by, so before she moderated that panel. But a shout out to both of them. What you doing?
Oh, it's fine.
Okay.
Also, that's the tea blend.
Oh.
Great. And you have 2 missed super chats, and unfortunately, it's in with stuff. So.
Oh. All right. My wife making sure we're staying on track here.
Messing stuff up.
Keeping up with the super chats. We'll make sure that we get both of those. Shout out to the gentleman that helped us out with the tea.
Mr. Dapper.
Mr. Dapper on the tea. This is the tea lady blend tonight. Here we go. So a couple super chats. Thank you, babe. All right. So what else is going out there in the market? Again, these people providing liquidity over there for Ripple Prime's balance sheet. I think that's good for everybody. So for those that don't understand what that business does, cross-margining assets is a big deal. Dapper Dan. Really, Ripple Prime is the first broker, and you could probably consider Falcon X in the same demographic of prime brokers that are willing to margin digital assets and give. So what does that mean? Basically, you're able to post that as collateral with them, and then they use that collateral and margin it, and you can put that into other things. So whether that's treasuries or bonds, or if you want to have it in stocks, you can park it wherever you want. This person said, "What's my shirt?" This was a gift. I play a little golf. And so a gentleman, sent me some shirts. I figured I'd wear it on it for him. Shout out to him. Thank you. You know who you are. Appreciate the swag. So back to the margin. For a lot of people that are holding digital assets, whether that's Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT, USDC, XRP, all of that, you'd be able to, park on the balance sheet there with Ripple Prime. And if you're an institution, so let me caveat that they do not face retail. They might face off with somebody else that could aggregate that and reflect it with them and a single counterparty that was an institution. But they will not, maybe 3-4 years now, like from now, like David Schwartz was talking about at XRP Vegas, they might make their way downstream to retail. But as it sits today, it's just going to be on the institutional side. Evernorth, I would expect, because of their ties there, probably, we'll be using the XRP on their balance sheet in some capacity with Ripple Prime. We'll have to see, what that looks like or if that's even the case. But, just speculating that might be the case based on, their positioning in the market and, their close ties with Ripple. But that's the benefit there. You're able to post that as collateral, margin it, be able to get access to other investments to be able to generate cash flow off of that position. This person says XRP going to $1 million. I would love to see it. I do think eventually we'll get there, but not here in 2026. That'd be a wild ride from $1.40 to $1 million. 3-4 digits here this year. I could see that. I actually think that personally. But again, that requires macro events. And also on the macro side, still watching oil hang out around 16,000, 17,000 yen per barrel. Still watching the JPY 10-year continue to rise. Bond yields are rising across the board. People selling off bonds because they are scared that they are going to have some volatility or not be, paying out. Japan has dumped a ton of treasuries in the last couple months here to be able to push the yen up against the dollar or strengthen their currency. But I think, they've intervened in the currency market 5 times now. Like I said, Monday, if they do one more time, they might have one more time before the IMF will step in. And then I do think we're going to see them raise interest rates. We have Warsh signed in or sworn in. I think last Friday was his first day. I watched a interview with him where he talked about reducing the Fed's balance sheet and lowering interest rates, which they would have to do. I talked about the 2 levers on Monday. If you didn't see that, I would go check it out. For me, watching what they're doing with monetary policy, if you knew a deflationary collapse was coming, you would front run it. You would print a ton of money, which is exactly what they've done. They've dumped, tons of money into the economy. M2 money supply is at an all-time high. Debt is at an all-time high. But if you knew that the economic growth and the inflation that was going to happen because the convergence of AI and blockchain was coming, you would probably do the same thing. So excited for this year in 2026 for the application of AI at scale, Anthropic, and many other. Here's a fun statistic. I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but I thought it was interesting. Sam Bankman-Fried, the infamous FTX deal, his private equity that he dumped when all that was going on would be worth $151 billion today. He owned like 10% of Anthropic back then. So, I'm not saying that if they had left him alone, everything would have been okay. But, there's enough value there that he could have definitely made everybody whole multiple times over at this point. So, and FTX was more collateralized than the banks are. The banks are fractional reserve lending. They hold 10 to 1. They're able to loan 10 to 1. So basically they have 1/10 of the reserves that they have out. And FTX actually, I think it had like 30 or 40% of what they had when they went under. So, hopefully we don't see another SVB or Silvergate or any of the things that happen with the regional banks, because the FDIC ain't got it. They would not be able to cover at this point. So, I'm hoping that we don't see a credit crisis and collapse, but with the reverse carry trade right here on the horizon, I think that that's a possibility. Again, not to scare anybody or say, you shouldn't keep your money in a bank. I think banks are stable. I think that they'll be, bailed out, or if there is a problem, there won't be an issue. Maybe they're holding enough XRP on their balance sheet to be okay when all this plays out. That's just my speculation. We'll see what holds true over the long term. So we got a lot of people on the live tonight. Again, appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday to come hang out with me and ask great questions. We'll go ahead and dive into those. I'll catch up on the super chats that I missed from Monday. And then we'll dive into the super chats that we have tonight over here on YouTube, X, Facebook, and on TikTok. Again, appreciate y'all taking the time out. So the first one here says, Jake the Dane to Jake the Man. This is G-Thord. They say, after price appreciation, can I use XRP at DWP for your service? I'd have to sell on an exchange anyways. Thank you. God bless. Yeah, post price appreciation, we probably will raise minimums just a little bit. But if XRP is $1,000, you would need 5,000 XRP to meet a $5 million minimum. That's, today we sit at 50,000 XRP as our minimum. That's literally an order of magnitude less in the total amount of XRP that you would need in order to be able to work with Digital Ascension Group. What?
Specifically, they want to know if they could use XRP to pay for an LLC trust.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not what he asked.
That's the reason why I wrote that down below. He sent us a super chat to pay more. That's why I wanted to, you did read that Monday, but you wanted to follow up. And by the way, Jake the Dane is his Great Dane.
Oh, that's cool. That's a big dog. So will we take XRP for payment post price appreciation? As it sits today, we can do that. It's kind of a workaround if people want to pay that way. I'd prefer you keep your XRP personally, and then be able to generate cash flow. If you had to sell some, we could figure that out, how we could finance it. Again, I'd prefer that people don't have to sell their XRP and they're able to keep as much as they can over the long term. Because the cost of benefit there, right? Like if you're selling your XRP at $100 or $1,000 and it goes to 10,000 or 100,000 or $1 million over the long term, I mean that's a lot of upside that you missed out on to just pay us for services. So ideally it's cash. Ideally, you're able to generate returns on the XRP that cover the cost of other services that we provide. Or if you did want to borrow against it, again, no tax implications for that. That would probably still be cheaper than whatever taxes you would owe for the long-term capital gains, unless Trump comes out and says, hey, no cap gains on crypto. Hopefully, I would love that just as much as everybody else would. But all that being said, we'll work on ways to be able to finance that type of stuff and make sure that, because again, at the end of the day, we're a fiduciary. We want to make sure that our clients are getting the most bang for their buck, literally. And I think, paying for your services in XRP to us, we're not going to say no if you're adamant that you want to do it that way. But we would probably provide some other avenues that would keep that XRP in your pocket so that you can continue to grow that over time, invest it, compound it for you and your family. But yeah, I'm sure that we will have an option for that if people just adamantly want to do it that way. This person says, does Chainlink have a partnership with DTCC? Apparently, using some ETH tech, sounds like a joke, have any effect? And this is Andrew. So Chainlink is an oracle. ETH is coded in Python and Solidity. It is the most prevalent coding language for smart contracts. So if you were going to structure data or smart contracts, that's why there's an EVM sidechain on the XRPL. But Chainlink being an oracle likely will have a partnership, if they'd already, I think they already do, with the DTCC, along with many other entities, including Swift and other, high-level systems that transfer value. You need an oracle, an enterprise oracle like Chainlink, in order to be able to move off-chain information on-chain to be able to execute smart contracts. So yes, they do. Chainlink was actually the first thing I ever invested in. It makes sense to me that you are absolutely going to need that oracle to be able to help facilitate, like I said, the execution of smart contracts at scale. IOTA is another one. So IOTA is an oracle. It's more for public domain. Chainlink tends to be more of a private side implementation. It's an enterprise oracle, like I said, and they have some other stuff there. They have CCIP, which is cross-chain interoperability protocol, and then, a few other things. So, I like Chainlink. I think it's going to be around. I think it's going to be used. Is it going to have significant price appreciation? Potentially, right? I missed out on the high. I bought in at like $3.84 in 2020, and then wrote it up to about $8 and let go of my position, which I learned a lot on that one. You should probably dollar cost average out, just like you dollar cost average in, if you plan to sell during a bull run, because it continued going higher. But all that being said, some of the other applications where you're able to actually write these investments off, and we've talked about this in the past, is if you're going to be using these blockchains or these tokens for something in your business to be able to facilitate business transactions or catalog information, or interact with different counterparties, or build out, like if you had a logistics business and you're buying VeChain or something else that you believe will be used in that application, and you're holding it on your business's balance sheet for that reason, not for an investment. So you have to be diligent about that and make sure it's done the right way. If you have a payment processing business and you're buying XRP and XLM, and you expect to be able to utilize those inside your business to facilitate transactions and transfers, so that you don't have to borrow that from somebody else, you would have to be running a node on these networks. There's some additional things that you need to be doing in order to be able to take a write-off against it. This is at its core software, which would fall under Section 179 of the tax code. So if you have some type of business where you're creating on-chain applications and smart contracts to be able to leverage that inside your business or license that to other counterparties, and you need an Oracle and you wanted to buy some Chainlink, there's a potential that you could be able to write that off. Again, you want to work with your CPA. I can't give you tax advice. I can't give you legal advice. You need to speak with an attorney or a CPA before making any tax or legal decisions. But we have worked with counterparties that have those designations and some clients to be able to effectuate what I just discussed. So, yeah, but back to the DTCC, I do think that Chainlink will be used in the smart contracts as an Oracle with that counterparty. All right, we'll go ahead and jump into some more of the super chats here. We got Silverado Man. I love the Silverado, dude. He says, thoughts on executive order from Trump today. So that was actually yesterday. Excuse me. I thought that was yesterday that he signed that executive order. So what that does is it effectively passes the PACE Act without passing the PACE Act through Congress. It could be overturned by the next administration, but it allows fintechs and other neobanks to be able to get a FedMaster account and facilitate payments on those same rails, the ACH and wire rails here domestically in the US. That's a big deal. Google, Amazon, Meta, X, all of these social media platforms that have payment transmitter licenses, but didn't have a FedMaster account or Fed window. Now they should be able to get those. We have seen, a few of those issued. Ripple has applied for theirs. They're a bank, and they have their charter at this point. So I don't know why they've kind of been delayed on that. The longest delay that we saw, because I looked this up the other day after it was passed, for a FedMaster account, the longest time it took was like 6 years for one to actually get through. The least amount of time that I was able to find was somewhere around 3 months, but that was for a bank. It was not for, somebody that was in crypto. So I believe Ripple applied for their master account last November. That was 7 months ago. So we're in the range at this point where they should be receiving that in the not too distant future. I wouldn't expect that it would take a full year for them to be granted that FedMaster account. But with them, Trump passing this executive order, it also brings in a bunch of other competition for payments across the board when it comes to these fintechs and other social media platforms to be able to get access to a Fed window and facilitate payments. So I think it's a good thing. I think it brings competition to the market. I think that there's going to be more people willing to pay you returns on your deposits. And the banks will be forced to, do the same in order to be able to compete, which is great for the consumer. John McNabb, my dude, he says, what's the actual on-ramp look like for a normal business that wants to accept XRP? but still needs dollars in the bank. Is it Bybit? No. There's a couple different payment processors, including WorldPay, that can facilitate crypto payments. So you can decide what you want on the other side of those transactions. You can even break it down into a percentage, like I want to receive 50% of this proceeds from my, client or person that's paying me in dollars, and the other 50% I want it to go into this crypto. And they charge 1%. Most of them do on those transactions, and they will convert it. So if somebody pays you in Bitcoin and you wanted to receive XRP, they would facilitate that transaction for you and swap it, and then deposit that to your wallet. You are going to have to list a wallet with them. Ideally, that's in like a Firebox instance at a minimum. You could hold it with Uphold next to your bank account there. We can do that inside of the app, the DAG app. So if you want to go to app.digitalascensiongroup.com and download that and upload your LLC, we don't have that infrastructure built in yet for payments to be able to, to be paid, but you could list those wallet addresses. You can also use unstoppable domains. I helped a few business owners way back in 2020 set that up. You can use an unstoppable domain and register it, and then attach whatever wallets you want those payments to go to. And people can make a payment to that unstoppable domain, and it will flow through to that wallet that you have listed to be able to accept those payments. So it's one unified, you don't have to have the wallet address or any of that. They send it to your unstoppable domain, and then it would route it to whichever, crypto wallet you were accepting. So if you wanted Bitcoin, Doge, I think it'll do Litecoin, XRP, XLM. They probably have a larger breadth now than they used to. Those are just the ones at the time. Obviously, Tether and USDC were there as well. So that's one way that you could do it if you did want to accept crypto. The problem that you're going to run into there is just the accounting side of it. So you're going to have to give your CPA or accounting team access to that wallet to be able to review the payments and then reconcile those with your books. They are, it's taxable income, just like it would be for anything else. So you're going to need to withhold taxes. So there's some additional complications if you don't use a payment processor that'll process crypto for you and, then send it to your wallets. It also doesn't work great with WooCommerce or whatever e-commerce platform you're leveraging in order to facilitate payments through an online avenue. If it's in store, you could probably have somebody scan a QR code that had your unstoppable domain listed as it, or just have them send it to your unstoppable domain. That way it's just it's the same thing over and over again. But again, in order to reconcile that and make sure your accounting's correct, you're going to have to give access to your CPA or your accountant. So those are if you want to just take it direct through the unstoppable domain, you're not going to deal with that 1% fee. But what's going to happen for sales tax and everything else out of that, you're going to have to take care of yourself. If you want to use one of the payment processors that WorldPay kind of backs, there's a couple different ones out there, or you can use WorldPay directly. They would be able to facilitate those. And, again, for that small fee of 1%, make sure that all the taxes were taken out and it's reconciled with your regular books through QuickBooks or another application. Mr. Shepard, he says, I'm new to XRP over the last 2 months and currently have around 4,300 on an exchange, Coinbase, while trying to accumulate more as budget allows. What's next step do I need to take to secure my XRP? For that amount, you would probably want to look at a cold wallet. I don't think that Coinbase is going anywhere. They're a publicly traded company. They have, however, gone down. When there's market volatility, you can't access it a lot of the time. They just get overwhelmed with the amount of people on their website, or at least that's what they say. And, they don't allow trading when that happens. So if you do anticipate selling some as the market's running higher, you probably, there's a good chance you won't be able to access it on that platform. But same thing with a cold wallet. Like if you're holding on a cold wallet and you want to send it back to an exchange to be able to sell some, you're not going to be able to do that. But you do have optionality. If it's on a cold wallet, you can figure out which exchanges haven't gone down or aren't having issues. And as long as you have accounts already set up at those, then you could move it back there or to one of those to be able to execute that trade. It depends on how much responsibility you want, is really what it comes down to. So if you are going to hold it on a cold wallet, that comes with some additional liability. Not that you have insurance and not that your assets are segregated. They're on Coinbase. They are owned by Coinbase. You are a creditor of Coinbase if you are holding your assets with them. On the institutional side, I think they're trying to figure something out over there where it's a little bit different. For us, we set up, for the benefit of, or FBO accounts at Anchorage. The minimum for us, though, is 50,000 XRP. So, not saying you have a little bag or it's not enough for us to deal with or any of those things. Just at this time, we don't accept clients that have less than that amount. So, your choices are kind of limited. It's either Fireblocks instance, if you wanted to go figure that out with somebody else, or use, leave it there on Coinbase. If you're okay with that, if you don't think they're going anywhere, and you don't need to access it if there's market volatility. But if you do want to take on the responsibility of holding it directly, then, I recommend Decent or Zaman or Tangem. There's a bunch of good cold wallets out there, Elipal, Arculus, both of those are air gapped. Do some research. Make sure that you're buying that cold wallet directly from the site and not off Amazon or eBay or any other things. Like skirting a little bit to save a little bit of money is not worth it on this. You should always buy direct from the manufacturer because you don't know who's tampered with that wallet. If they have access to your keys, if they're trying to sell it to you so you can put your crypto on there and they steal it from you. That's why I like Decent. We're an affiliate for them, full transparency. We get like $5 if you use our link on YouTube or in, the link tree or any of the other social media platforms. I prefer them. They have a really nice UI. It's easy to use. They have a biometric thumbprint. You can add an additional key so that your spouse can get to it if, God forbid, something were to happen to you. Have a large breadth of assets to be able to hold on that device. So, that's kind of my go-to for a cold wallet. Aside from Zaman, Zaman specific for XRP, you can download the app on your phone. When you're setting this up, you want to make sure that you're writing down the seed phrase for whatever wallet you're using on a piece of paper. You probably want to make 3 or 4 copies of that, and you want to hold those in some different locations just in case a house burns down or something happens. You want to be able to recover those if you need to. Bury it in your yard in a can, something like that. There's just different things that you can do in order to make sure you have some backups if, God forbid, you're in a situation like they were in California with the wildfires. There was a ton of people that lost seed phrases, even on metal plates. It was so hot that those burnt. They weren't able to recover those after. So if you were to lose your phone or the drive that you had it on, whatever storage device it was, and the seed phrase, it's gone for forever. There's no insurance. There's no recourse. It's not like you can get it back. So just be prepared for that additional responsibility if you do make those choices. A lot of people I know hold their assets in a couple different places just to be able to kind of navigate that risk and have some diversification across different custodians and a cold wallet. Many of our clients do that. They don't hold all of their XRP or their other digital assets with digital wealth partners. So I don't know if that's helpful for you. I try to explain that pretty thoroughly, but again, appreciate the super chat. And for all those that are new, definitely, watch some videos on the best way to set up your cold wallet. Again, you probably if you want to get real safe about it, set up a completely separate email. You only use one device and that's all you use it for. Go buy a laptop specific, $200 or something that you log into the internet on, and you turn off when you're not using it. You can be very secure. And probably if you're managing a lot of money, it's a great way to do it. Or again, you can just work with Digital Ascension Group and Digital Wealth Partners, hold it at Anchorage, and know that it's segregated, bankruptcy remote, insured, up to $100 million. You have a countersigner on the account and an advisor, just like you would a Schwab account or something else, to make sure that your stuff has continuity. Your beneficiaries are on the account, your spouse is on the account. It's easier to report on. You can show it on your balance sheet if you're buying a home. But there's a ton of benefits to working with us if you do have the capital to do so. But that would be my recommendation for the amount that you have. Papa, good to see you, sir. He says, Jake, hope all is well. Question, is there enough institutional participants in the XRPL for mass liquidity needed to push the numbers up? So I don't think that's how this is going to work. I've kind of stated that before. I don't think the volume on the network is actually what's going to drive the price. I think that they're going to need a supply shock on the market, on the exchanges, in order to be able to drive enough liquidity into the asset. And then once there's enough liquidity in it, institutions will step in and start using it at scale to be able to settle transactions. Until there's enough liquidity in it, I don't believe that there's a way that they can actually facilitate that at scale, because there's not enough liquidity for those transactions. And so they're waiting on, some price appreciation, just like we are, in order to start using it. But once it's there, the volume that they're moving over the network will hold it at a high, stable price. And at that point, there are a lot of people sitting in the wings that are already integrated. All you got to do is literally flip a switch. There's thousands of them, according to Brad Garlinghouse. And as those get turned on and people start settling through XRP with different counterparties or for whatever marketplace they're running, that's when we'll see, a high stable value for XRP. But again, I think we need BlackRock, the ETF there, and some other, macro catalysts that I've described in the domino theory in order to be able to push the price to where it needs to be before they can even start using it in that capacity. All right. We've got William, Mr. Kilgore. He says, evening, Jake. So how many advisors has your business hired in the past 2 months or so? We haven't really hired a whole lot of advisors in the last couple months. I think 1 or 2 is all we brought on in the last couple months. Currently manage about 4,000 clients. We have about 30 advisors. So each client or each advisor has, what would that be? 110-ish clients that they are currently servicing. As we bring on some of these other products and solutions, I think that our consumer or, client base will continue to grow. A lot of people, are holding some assets away or are waiting for the yield product or some other things that we're releasing before they kind of double down and add more to their accounts, which is completely understandable. But that's, where we're currently at. We haven't continued to scale at as rapid a pace as we were at the end of last year. And I think that's a good thing. A lot of the advisors that we currently have on staff are seasoned in now. They've been here for, 3, 4, 5, 6 months or longer. And because of that, they're going to have a deeper understanding of what our clients need, the products that we have, and the ability to service our client base at a better standard than, not to say that new advisors aren't great. They are. However, it just takes you a little time to get up to speed. And many people come in and work underneath an advisor before they take on a full book for themselves. And at this point, we've kind of made that transition. And I believe all of our advisors at this point have their own book and are continue to service clients and getting even better at it as we moved on here. So yeah, that's where we sit today. Market moves. We've got a backlog of a lot of people that would love to work here, and we will bring them on and train them up quickly in order to be able to meet the demand as XRP expands in value. Mr. Johnson, he's just, JC is meeting with clients, it's Pinhead. He's levered heavy on the reverse carry trade on December 25th after punishing 27,891 fake jakes. He found the real one, but needs help. Lucifer has called Pinhead's margin. Some wild scenarios that he throws out here. Yeah, we saw people probably take a little bit of undue risk at the end of last year. I can understand. I think a lot of people felt that things would move just kind of like I did. And many things still have played out this year in 2026, exactly as I laid them out last year. This has just been a little bit slower grind than, I think anybody anticipated, but that's okay. The inevitable outcome is still going to take place. It's just, how much longer can they kick the can? I don't think they have that much longer. Like I said, Japan's down to their last time that they can intervene in the currency market. And now that we have, not effectively the PACE Act, but the executive order by Trump allowing fintechs and other people to participate. Japan also regulating that stablecoins can be used as regulated payment between counterparties starting June 1st. Stock market's going to be tokenized this year in July with full-fledged tokenization across the board in October. So, like Monica Long said earlier this year at XRP Community Day, I believe, and so does she, that we will see full-scale adoption for XRP here in 2026, which means XRP has to be a high price for that to happen. Off the grid, Hero says property tax and capital gains, if disappeared, could they remove the lifetime gift tax, or is there a loophole, the irrevocable trust, or is the loophole irrevocable trust? So there's no loophole on taxes, just to be clear. You're still going to have to gift those assets out of your taxable estate. Ideally, you're gifting assets out of your taxable estate at a much lower valuation than what they're going to be later on, because if they appreciate in your taxable estate, you're only allowed 15 million per person or 30 million per couple that you can gift over your lifetime. So, if you pass away and you have 30 million in your estate, it passes to your heirs. They get a step up in basis, which means, they inherit the assets at the new valuation. So if they decide to sell them, there's no taxes for them on that first 30 million. Anything above that, they get taxed at 40%, irrespective of if it's cash or assets. So holding that inside of the irrevocable trust or an ILET or some of the other ways that we, do some more of the complex estate planning over here with Digital Ascension Group is a much more tax advantaged way to be able to do it, to pass it to the next generation. Could they get rid of the lifetime gift tax threshold? Sure. Canada has none. Canada has no lifetime gift tax threshold. They get you in other ways. Taxes are actually worse in Canada than they are here in the US for the most part. So sorry if you're Canadian. My advice, if you're Canadian, would be, I don't want to say move, because that sounds harsh, but realistically, that's really the only way that you can get away from that tax regime. It's residency based, whereas the US is citizenship based. So it doesn't matter where you travel to, you're still going to be subject to US tax code if you have American citizenship. But if you're in the UK, Australia, Canada, or anything else that the monarchy has set up, it's residency based. So if you can still be a citizen there, but you move out of there, and you're not going to have to be subject to the taxes in that jurisdiction. Property tax in Florida is what they're trying to get rid of. When I was down there talking to the people that are local, they were saying that it's just on a certain types of property. It's not all the property tax. Capital gains on crypto, would love to see that go away. They're not going to do away with all capital gains. There's still going to be taxes for some period of time. I'm hopeful that, our money moves back to the Treasury just like everybody else is. I mean, that the IRS and the Fed go away. But until that's an actual reality, we have to live in the paradigm that we exist in and continue to do what we can to navigate taxes in the best way possible to, ideally keep more money in your pocket than sending out to the government. And the reason I prefer that is, I believe that I'm a better allocator of capital than the US government is, but you're going to be a philanthropist one way or the other. You're either going to be a forced philanthropist where you're giving that money to the government and they're doling it out to people, or you're going to be a willing philanthropist and set up a foundation or give to charities or do other things with your money to be able to write off the taxes that way. Every single family office that I have ever talked to has a philanthropic component. They donate to charities or churches or causes that they feel strongly about. They've probably set up, most of them, if not all of them, have set up a family foundation. Again, I mentioned this on the Monday deal, but I'll reiterate it here. Bill Gates and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has sold all of their Microsoft stock, 7.7 million shares for a total of $3.2 billion. Markets are a little bit down today. I'm hopeful that they, rebound. Like I said, Monday, the 618 Fibonacci Again, I'm not a chart person. I'm just, trying to figure out where the market might top at if it does have a blow off top, which I think we're moving into, is somewhere between 7,900 and 8,000. So that's for the S&P. So if we see the market continue to rise, that's kind of the levels that I'm looking for it to, really be, have a heavy resistance against and kind of be taken aback. That's not that large a percentage move from where we're at now. So, again, I'm not telling you to sell. I'm not giving you financial advice if you own stocks, but I would at least go have a conversation with your financial advisor and talk to them about the reverse carry trade and see if that's anything that's even on their radar. The family office conference that I was at Monday and Tuesday this week, I got to talk with the CIO of RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. And, he is familiar with that. They manage some very wealthy families' money, and they're navigating that risk. He doesn't feel, the gentleman that spoke didn't feel that it was a large market risk at this point. I heavily disagree with that. But that's okay. Everybody has their opinion. Me and Michael Guyad and Dario over there on Twitter are shouting it from the rooftops. Everybody else is, got their head in the sand, kind of ignoring it, thinking that it already unwound and it'll be fine. I don't think that's the case. I think we're still going to see significant downside markets when that unwinds. But again, taking it back to what I just stated, not telling you to sell any of your stocks. I'm not giving you financial advice. But I think it is a good time, to probably go have a conversation with your financial advisor if you do have an allocation there about, the reverse carry trade and potentially being able to hedge against some market volatility if there is a downturn that is significant. Rick Johnson, again, good to see you, dude. Has Mr. Blister. I am cautious about meme coins. They remind me of a business that I remember, Nocturnal Airlines, a fly-by-night operation. These are good dad jokes. He has really good dad jokes. Off the Grid Hero says, in the future, electronic cars forced on us, driving for the poor, flying for the rich. Jetson 1 seems like the future. So, I've had this debate with my wife. She's still adamant that we will continue to be driving cars by the time my son is old enough to drive. I don't think we will. I think, over that period of time, I won't divulge how old my son is, but I think by the time he's old enough to be able to get a license, most of, if not all of the vehicles on the road will be self-driving. I know that that's a weird paradigm shift from how we've grown up and how the world's operated for our entire lifetimes up to this point, if you're, watching this. But with the technology advancing at the pace that it is, and with AI and LiDAR and all the other things that are coming around, robo taxis are rolling out. People are paying like a $99 a month subscription to be able to, call a robo taxi when they need it. They've already got, what was the lit? It was like 37,000 people subscribed in just a few cities here in Texas, and they're rolling that out nationwide and internationally over the next 12 months. I mean, you got Waymo, and there's a few other self-drive, the Google car. There's a bunch of them out there at this point that are piloting technology. I will say that it's not perfect yet, for sure. There's definitely some accidents and issues that have happened. It's not ready for scale yet, but I do think that that's coming. And as time progresses, I think that it will improve. I don't know that they're ever going to be able to work out all the kinks on it, but at the same time, like, how many wrecks do people cause every single day? A lot. And I mean, if you ran the statistics on it, I would expect that self-driving cars would probably, I don't know about yet, but in the future, have less wrecks than people do. I know I'm distracted driving, and I would much prefer to sit in the back seat and make phone calls and work and do other stuff and just have the car drive me where I needed to go. And I think most people would opt for that option. When it comes to flying cars, in the book, The Future is Faster Than You Think, highly recommend you read that. If you haven't ever, read that, I think give you a lot of perspective on where we're at today in 2026 in comparison to when that book was written in 2018. But flying cars was one of the advanced technologies that they were talking about culminating. My wife says she's not getting in a Waymo. She'll come around. She didn't want to use ChatGPT early on either, but you know, it'll grow on her. We'll get her in a self-driving car at some point. But back to the flying cars. So you got Airbus, you got Uber, you've got a few other people out there that are competing in that vertical. Still not sure on that one either. You know, air traffic control and other things. There's these drones now that's a single person drone that can fly you from place to place. Anytime you're flying, you know, that's kind of scary, whether it's a helicopter or a jet or a plane. Those go down, you know, at least once a week. I hear about something crashing. Cars happen every single day. You know, there's per year in Texas, you know, they'll post it on, you know, the billboards normally around Christmas or holidays when people do drink and drive, and they'll just remind you not to, and they'll tell you how many wrecks have you know, how many people have lost their lives in wrecks in Texas. It's normally, you know, a little bit south of 2,000 people per year in the great state of Texas that end up unfortunately passing away through car accidents. But yeah, flying cars, I don't know. You would definitely need some type of operating system, an AI or something else, to be able to direct traffic in the air. Humans, if we were flying those, I don't think it would go so well. So I don't know how imminent that is. I think that there's a significant adoption curve there. Again, people are scared. There's probably cost prohibitive in the short term. But it's kind of like SpaceX, right? And the rockets that Elon has figured out. He's able to reuse the parts. He's brought the cost of space travel down substantially. I think the same will happen for, you know, Ubers and, you know, robo-taxis and those things, in addition to the flying vehicles to be able to transport you. I think public transport will also be a huge thing in the future. They've talked about building a hypersonic rail between Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin and Fort Worth. Be kind of like a big triangle here in Texas. You'd be able to get to Houston in like 30 minutes. Right now, it's about a 3-hour drive to be able to do that. I could see that happening before we saw flying cars. We already have hypersonic rail in some other countries. You know, especially in Eastern countries, those have been successful. But yeah, you know, I'm thinking more like 2040 before we see the Jetsons type stuff. Would love to be wrong. Would love to have it happen sooner, but that's just my 2 cents. Scott Maddox says, "Hey Jake, pray for you and your family. I hope you're well." Thank you, dude. We appreciate the prayers, and we are doing great. We're very blessed. He says, Am I safe outside of the DAG app on Uphold with my XRP? I've been seeing some unsettling posts lately on Uphold actions. I haven't been seeing any of those posts. You know, I trust Uphold. That's why we partnered with them. However, I will say, you know, we have purview of the infrastructure over there that we are white labeling from them inside the DAG app. So, you know, we're looking to build in some additional assurances. As it sits right now, it's just, you know, a white labeled version of their instance, but we have the oversight on it for our clients and users. So if that gives you the warm and fuzzy that there's some additional controls, or that we're, you know, kind of verifying things on that application, then yeah, we would love to have you on the app. But again, I don't know that you're in any type of jeopardy over there on Uphold's regular application either. Thank you for the super chat, Mr. McGee. We've got Mr. Luther. He says, hello, legend. What's up, dude? What is your opinion of tokenization of gold on, I'm assuming he means Ethereum blockchain. Do you view Ethereum as a competitive threat? God bless. So again, there's an EVM sidechain on the XRPL. Ethereum is proof of stake. They've already had a 51% attack on the network. That's why you have Ethereum Classic. So the network has been forked once in the past. The latency is very high for Ethereum, especially when the network's congested. Costs also go up substantially on Ethereum when the network's congested. It just doesn't have enough throughput, and that's why you've seen a lot of layer 2s built out on top of Ethereum to be able to kind of band-aid those gaps, or have workarounds to be able to facilitate transactions between counterparties that have developed DeFi applications, either on Ethereum itself or on layer 2s. I think the EVM, which is the Ethereum virtual machine, will be used in a bunch of different applications, but Ethereum, the blockchain itself, really hasn't lived up to the hype over the long term that was set out by Vitalik and Joseph Lubin. It took them a long time to migrate from proof of work to proof of stake, and it really didn't do much for the throughput and cost on that network. It's a mainstay. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But again, Bitcoin and Ethereum, I kind of view as the Napster or the Alta Vista of crypto. Both of those are first movers. They have large market share. They disrupted industries. They have, unique technologies that a portion of it will be used in the future. However, as better options come to market that are more secure, higher throughput, lower cost, I think that those will see the adoption. And we've already seen that transition once in the past with Ethereum. Ethereum originally had the majority of the NFTs issued on that blockchain. Bored Ape Yacht Club and many of the other things that happened in 2021 were on that network. And then we saw a large migration for meme coins and NFTs, over to Solana in this last cycle, because Solana has much higher throughput and much lower cost than Ethereum. I think the same will be true as some of these other networks like the XRPL, Hedera, and XLM come into vogue during this next utility phase of the application or adoption of this asset class and these protocols. So I don't really view it as a threat. I think it's great in the fact that it disrupted an industry and created a whole new vertical for smart contracts. But I think that there are much better networks that can facilitate that at scale versus Ethereum over the long term. All right, Brad, Mr. Bryson, he says, hey, Jay, outside of a supply shock, how would the mechanics work in the future for Ripple institutions with the escrow being locked up? They can't use it until it's released, right? Or how does that work? Well, $1 billion is released each month on the first of the month, 12 a.m. UTC is when that's unlocked. Anybody can go in there and actually, unlock the escrow and release the XRP. That was put out by Vet, and he actually went out and did that one time when I was saying, hey, they haven't, taken the escrow out yet. It goes to a wallet that Ripple controls, right? So they then get to make the distribution, do what they're going to do with it. Whether that's, re-escrow a portion of it like they have for the majority of the time that they've had those releases. The last couple years, it's been 700 million that they've re-escrowed on the back end of the note. They have over 50 wallets that escrow is released to at this point. They normally take about 300 million and put it on the market and sell that each month to be able to generate cash flow for their business and, do other things with, buy shares back, do whatever else they're doing. Scaling, institutional partnerships, gaining adoption for XRP, which is their North Star. I still think people don't understand the order of events that have to take place for XRP to see significant price appreciation and how Ripple plays an integral role in helping that along. They can't orchestrate it themselves. Otherwise, it would be a security of Ripple. So they do, have a large portion of the escrow. Anybody can escrow XRP on the XRPL, by the way. So if you want to go play with that function, you can just go to xrptoolkit.com and you can, add your wallet address, and you can play with the different functionality that's native on chain built into your wallets. Time escrows are one of those. So if you wanted to, lock up some XRP over a period of time that would flow back to your wallet at a future date, you can do that. I've done that with a large portion of what I have, so it'll come back to me, in the future, hopefully at a higher price than what it sits at today. But all that being said, with the Clarity Act, no one company is supposed to be able to control more than 20% of the total supply. I think that because they have, they've thought this through, and they've got over 50 wallets that the escrow is going to over time, they could easily, transfer those wallets or the keys to those wallets or access to those wallets to a larger body, the U.S. government, people that had, pre-negotiated options on certain amounts of XRP could redeem that XRP as it was released from escrow over time to those additional wallets. There's lots of different ways that they could orchestrate that in order to be able to meet that, regulation if it were passed. Which again, I'm still skeptical on the Clarity Act. I would love to see it happen, just like everybody else would. I was literally advocating for it last year on Capitol Hill alongside the Genius Act during the summer when we got the Genius Act passed. But with as long as it's taken and them just now passing the markup, we're supposed to see it on the Senate floor within the next 30 days. I'm hopeful that the Senate actually passes that. But with the amount that they struck out of the bill that the Democrats had put in there, I don't know that they're going to get the additional 5 to 7 votes that they need for that to actually be able to pass the Senate when they do put it up for a vote. If they do, it would then have to go to the House. The House is primarily Republican, so they should be able to get it through there. And then, again, to the president's desk in order to be able to get him to sign that into law. Ideally, people are talking about July 4th, that being passed. Again, would love to see it. I'm very skeptical that that's going to end up taking place here in 2026 with midterms, the PACE Act, the SAVE Act, and other things kind of on the docket for Congress's attention. I'm still giving it about a 5% chance that it passes. And again, would love to see that 5% happen, but not overly convinced that they're going to be able to get it done. Everyday Scout says Amendment 77 in the Clarity Act. Let's talk about it. How does Amendment 77 hurt XRP? I don't know what that is, so we're going to ask. Amendment 77 in the Clarity Act. Says proposed change submitted by Elizabeth Warren, of course, is primarily for the purpose to strike the bill's grandfather clause, which was originally designed to protect established digital assets from being retroactively classified as regulated securities. The Clarity Act clause shields existing digital commodities from being unexpectedly treated as securities. Amendment 77 seeks to eliminate this protection, which would open up established tokens to retroactive regulation. XRP obviously has that designation from the CFTC and also from the case between the SEC and Ripple, when the judge decided that on July 13th, 2023, she ruled that XRP in and of itself is not a security. So if it were to pass as it sits, that would remove XRP's, for sure clarity at this point. Again, I don't think it's going to get passed. Just my 2 cents. Joseph, good to see you. He says, hey, Jake, there's a YouTuber who's popular on the Beyond Right Mastermind. His central thesis is that XRP price will be set administratively by the BIS, governments, international banks. Put your tinfoil hat on for a minute. Is there a way this could be true? I mean, sure. The BIS could come out and say this is what the price of XRP is going to be. But my whole premise behind why I kind of disagree with that is you need flexibility in the price. You need it to be dynamic in order to continue to absorb liquidity and and change in value as more volume moves onto the network. And if you have a fixed value or price for it, it really truncates its ability to do that. It becomes inflexible or rigid. So for me, my theory, and we all want the same thing, by the way. I'd be happy either direction, just so that I'm clear on that. I'm not saying anybody's wrong here. I have my thesis. I think other people have their thesis. We get to the same end goal, which we all know is going to happen. So again, not financial advice. Do your own research. Can't tell you what the future is going to hold. Previous returns aren't indicative of future performance. All the disclaimers there. But that being said, the BIS could come out and say, "Hey, XRP is $2,000." And Ripple could give them a large portion of the supply through force majeure, or again, pre-negotiated options or contracts on the XRP that they set up with 1,700 NDAs that they have. And then they tell the banks what it's worth, and that's where they set it on the balance sheet. For me, so if you read the white paper that the IMF wrote back in 2014, where they talked about an exchange rate peg, that asset has to be flexible. It can't be a fixed denominated amount. And so that's where, I kind of differ on that. Again, it's kind of logistics on how we get there. I don't really care who's right at the end of the day. We know where it's going and how it's going to be used. But my tinfoil hat says that, BlackRock's going to launch their ETF. Exchanges are going to go illiquid. Markets are going to go illiquid. You're going to see a ton of liquidity rotate into XRP, huge amounts of demand on the exchanges, pushing the price to where it needs to be for them to start using it at scale to be able to settle the back into markets. That additional volume is going to continue to drive price after a certain point. And it doesn't need to be reset administratively in order to be able to accomplish the goal and maintain flexibility as markets continue to grow over time. Again, that's just my thesis, but people are going to pontificate on different outcomes and how it could happen. And I'm glad that there's other people out there talking about significantly higher prices for XRP outside myself. So glad to have you in the mastermind. If you want to join the mastermind and you're watching this, we would love to have you in there. All you got to do is go to beyondbroke.com and use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2 there in Carbon One or Social. Try it out month to month, no contract. Close to 17,000 people there in the mastermind. And again, I'm very proud of the culture that we have there. I'm very biased, but we do more in real life events than any other community. We're in private deals. We do financial education, provide business resources. We have unique speakers come in there and provide education on different topics. Business credit, personal credit, M&A, insurance, estate planning, taxes, all of the like. We want to make sure that people have access to really good resources. So if any of that sounds cool to you and you want to try it out, we would love to have you in there. Again, beyondbroke.com and use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2. $5.89 on the super chat. He says, legend. When are we getting Dodge Vipers? I want to drop the clutch on my ex's driveway. Why is the OCC guidance taking so long? I need a jet. Awesome. Telling me, dude. So the OCC can bring their guidance to market anytime before July 18th is the deadline for that. Again, with the Japan coming out about the regulation for stablecoins on June 1st, maybe that's a tell on timeframes for things. Again, with the tokenization of the stock market in July being rolled out in Q3 and then, kind of up there in Q4, I think that, we need a significantly higher price for XRP and back-end settlement of the stock market for the DTCC and Project Ion prior to the tokenization of the stock market. So again, I've said this multiple times here on this channel, but watching May, June, July pretty closely to see what all is going to play out. I don't think Japan can kick the can further down the road than July of this year. The nail pounder, the old nail pounder, excuse me. He says, JC the legend and T Queen. Appreciate you, dude. Can you give us the lowdown on HBAR? God bless the Claver family and DAG family. Thanks for looking out for us, the little guy. Thank you, dude. Appreciate the kind words and the support. As far as HBAR goes, it's in my top 3. XRP, HBAR, and hash are kind of the things that I personally, think are going to do the best over the coming decade. Again, could be wrong there. Not financial advice. Do your own research. I'll speak to HBAR and what I think it's going to be used for and why. So the council that Hedera has 39 seats on it. Each one of those seats has to rotate every 6 years. They have many large corporations and entities in those seats currently. You got Google, IBM, Boeing, Dell, and multiple banks on that, governance council. So I don't know why they would be on the governance council unless they were actually going to use the technology. HBAR is also here in my backyard up in Plano in Texas. So the Hedera Foundation and their corporation is located here. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm biased. They are a Texas company. I think that the majority of dApps in the future or decentralized applications will be built out on HBAR. Digital identity around HIPAA compliance for health records, I think is a huge, market for HBAR. A lot of proprietary data and security around data, I think is what HBAR is really good at and will be used for. The fees on HBAR's network are fixed and they're dollar denominated. So obviously a US-based cryptocurrency and would also benefit from Trump coming out with no capital gains tax on, domestic cryptos or companies that are, created cryptos for things here in the US. They have their stablecoin factory. They now have like an atomic swap mechanism that they rolled out at HederaCon. Just a lot of fantastic technology built into that network, and it's hash graph. It's not blockchain. It's a different acyclic graph. It's not an acyclic. It's actually a hash graph. It's completely different than an acyclic graph or a traditional blockchain, and that's why it's more secure. It has high throughput, similar to XRP. It can facilitate payments, but I think it's going to be primarily used to be able to facilitate secure data transfer between counterparties. So I've got multiple videos on the channel. If you want to go check those out, I would encourage you to do so. Again, big fan of HBAR, and do think that it will see high prices over the coming decade. This person says, we are disobedient to Claverites in the wilderness, bear market, ignoring stone tablets, the domino theory, and worshiping the golden calf meme coins. Appreciate the super chat and the laugh. They say, this one's Tokyo City. They say, what's your take on the new Drake albums? You know what? Candidly, I don't remember the last time I listened to the radio. If I'm driving, I listen to house music or audiobooks or other YouTube channels to be able to look through, the macro and other people's opinions on things or financial education. I listened to Drake's first album when it came out when I was in high school, a long time ago. So I couldn't tell you. I don't know what songs are on it. I'm not cool anymore. Pop culture and all of that. Like I don't watch the Kardashians or any of that stuff. Jersey Shore was kind of, the last reality TV that I ever watched. And that was a long time ago. Right. So I'm probably not the person to ask about that stuff. This person says, Jake with the house music. Look, like I was, in Texas, we're big into our country, red dirt, music. It is not that I have a problem with country or red dirt. But like some of the stigma about country is true. A lot of it is kind of heartbreak, you know, kind of woe is me type music, and I try to stay upbeat on stuff, and sometimes I just don't want any lyrics, and I just want, you know, something to occupy the background noise while I'm thinking about things. So that's what I use house music for. So anyway, love it or hate it. I know there's a lot of different opinions about that out there, and I'm sure my taste will continue to change as I get older. That's just, you know, my current situation and things that I listen to when I'm driving or traveling. Big J K 589 says, when 65 and 66 go live, does Ripple change their escrow release to fund liquidity pools? Perhaps that XRP is owned by parties under NDA issued stables. So they cannot change the escrow release. It's always going to be $1 billion a month on whatever time frames they've set out. There are some people out there that have talked about, you know, the escrow being released around other considerations. I don't know how you do that. Again, I've used the XRP toolkit to escrow my own XRP, or at least a portion of it. And I don't know that I don't have another way to do it outside of a time lock. And so you escrow it and it goes back to whatever wallet you designate. So it could be your wallet that you escrowed from, or another wallet that you're escrowing to. If you're doomed to it and it's the first time that you're messing with it, you know, I would do it for a 24-hour lock, or a little bit less than that, and make it go back to the same wallet that you sent it from, and go through an escrow release just to be able to trial it and test it out so you're comfortable with it. Again, not making recommendations that anybody do any of this stuff. Just there's tools at your disposal if you want to go learn about them and use them. But as far as 65 and 66, the liquidity pools and borrow lend, once they're native on chain, you know, are going to be huge assets to the XRPL, and I think will be used at scale. Ripple will use it with the XRP that they have, Evernorth, many others, to be able to generate returns. I don't think it's going to work the way that people think it's going to work. So there's, you know, likely going to be some type of administrator on those pools that underwrites the risk on how things are being loaned. Probably, you know, an arbiter or attorney or something that's put in place to be able to navigate, you know, discrepancies, or when people are mad at one another because somebody didn't make a payment or something happens. It's not just going to be, you know, a totally on-chain application where there's no off-chain activity. Otherwise, the banks aren't going to adopt those to be able to facilitate business at scale the way that they do. Over time, I think that the stuff will move on chain, but in the beginning, a lot of the underwriting and risk and other stuff, it's just going to be the transactions that are happening on the blockchain. But yeah, Ripple can't change the cadence of the escrow even if they wanted to, unless they're doing it on each of the new escrows that they're relocking, which again, it's a public blockchain. You can go look those up if you want to. Michael, Apollo Jets. Hey, dude. He says, Big Jake, love the t-shirt. Mike here. Have you heard anything about Goldman selling out of the 153 million XRP ETF position? I've been seeing it on social media. Japan is a powder keg waiting to happen. I agree on the Japan part. It does look like Goldman and Citi both exited their positions on the XRP ETFs when we got the markup passed through the, you know, for the Clarity Act. Look, they're fiduciaries. If they see an opportunity in the market and they feel like, you know, they can buy back cheaper later, they're probably going to take some profits, if not all of their profits, when it's advantageous to do so. So that doesn't mean that they're out of the market. It doesn't mean that they don't have XRP on their balance sheet or an option contract with Ripple or some other counterparty to be able to hold XRP directly. But for them to sell that ETF into that buy pressure that we saw doesn't surprise me. Again, they are opportunistic and there to make money. And if they felt like they could continue to average into the market for some duration of time and buy back at cheaper prices than what they were selling, that's how you make money. At least for them. This person says, hey, Jake, do you think the reverse carry trade issue will cause the crypto market to crash? Love all you do. God bless you. Inspire me to get XRP. Awesome, dude. See, that's cool. Appreciate the kind words and the support. I do. I think that there's actually going to be a huge consolidation of crypto when the reverse carry trade unwinds. And I think that, there's going to be implications for Tether. I think many things will go down substantially in value during that period. I don't think you're going to be able to transact. I know a lot of people are looking for lower prices to be able to enter the market and get things, from a couple years ago, or try to get XRP at 50 cents or 40 cents, or, get as much as they can. I understand that, especially, if you weren't around during the lawsuit and you're just now showing up in the last year or so. I get that. I really do. What I would say there is, in a liquidity crisis, exchanges are going to go down. They're going to get consolidated. I think institutions are going to be ready there to swoop in and bail them out and buy them up at, pennies on the dollar. And likely during that duration of time, you won't be able to trade. You won't be able to do anything. Your XRP may be locked on that platform for some period of time. Again, exchanges are probably not where you should be holding your digital assets. If you are a creditor of the counterparty you're holding your crypto with, there's some undue risk there, additional risk in that situation. If they need your XRP in a liquidity crisis, it's their XRP. They're going to use it. They're going to take it, and their obligation to use is going to be the cash value at the time. So just be aware of those things. Again, I'm not saying that exchanges are going to be malicious or perform those actions or making accusations that that's going to take place. I'm just saying that it's a possibility in that situation. So cold wallets, institutional custody with Digital Ascension Group, neither one of those are going to have those concerns. And you'll be able to ride through that period of time if you're holding your assets in that way until you get to the other side and we see, what I think are going to be substantially higher prices for XRP. So yes, I do think that there's going to be a crash. Don't know if you're going to be able to buy during that period of time. If you have an OTC desk or broker, like Uphold is a broker, they source liquidity from across all of the major exchanges and other counterparties. They may be able to access liquidity. Caleb Brown also might be able to access liquidity during that period of time because they are also a broker. So if you were going to hold cash, anticipating a drop in the market for that period of time, either one of those may be a better option for you. Also talked to OKX the other day, and they also have direct access to liquidity. So instead of being, kind of a broker across that, they have built a DEX globally, which is really cool, by the way. Like, they did a really good job on this. It's some infrastructure that I'd never seen before. And they have direct access to liquidity, during those times. So OKX might be another option for you in that capacity. So yeah, those would be kind of the three that I would be looking at to create accounts with or do something with in order to be able to facilitate a buy if there is market volatility and certain exchanges go illiquid or go down during that period. But yeah, I think there's going to be a huge consolidation. I think, the whole space is going to consolidate from over 50,000 cryptos down to like less than 100 during that period. Honest Aim, good to see you. He says, Mr. Legacy, hi to the tea lady. Are you at 200,000 yet? What's the deal with some people? Best man on YouTube. I don't know about all that, dude. Thank you for the kind words, though. He says, building White Rock for us business partners. Eternally grateful for all you do and the misses. Thank you, brother. Thank you for the kind words. And again, we are almost to 200,000 subscribers over on YouTube. If you're watching over here on TikTok, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on X, it would really mean a lot if you could go over and subscribe on YouTube, even if that's not normally the way you consume this content or other content. We would love to get to 200,000. That's on the bucket list for me this year. So again, appreciate all the support, all the subscribers, all the likes. I should probably say this. I always forget to do it. Please like, subscribe, share, turn on the notification bell for stuff going on in the channel. It does help the algorithm, helps this reach a broader audience. If you don't find value in it, don't do those things. I'm not, telling that anybody and everybody should, but if you do enjoy this and you do watch frequently, All those things do help. EIN's null 01 says legend. What's up, dude? You gave us a hint at a French guy who used to work at the BIS and now at the ECB. Any other tips of interesting people we should look into, BIS or other? Hold on. Actually, we'll do it this way. Sunak, he was prime minister for the ECB, not the ECB, but in the EU after Liz, what was the other lady's name? Anyway, she was only in for 45 days, and then Sunak was in for a little while and helped pass some legislation. If you want to go look him up and his connections with certain Indian families and some other stuff, I think you'll find some good things there too. So, you know, again, there's a lot of people that have moved around in the background over the years and been able to pass certain legislation or get things done in whatever period of time they were in office that had a net benefit for XRP. So that's another one if you want to go check it out. Bill here says, I flew to Dallas and personally delivered tea to your office. You said you would try it. I guess Mr. Dapper rates higher second week in a row. Ouch. Here's the deal, Bill, and I appreciate the tea. I hate lavender. And I don't know that I've ever said that on here. I have a hard time with that flavor and with that scent. Not sure that the one that you delivered was lavender or not. I will verify that with my wife. But if it was, that is the reason that I have not drank it. I do appreciate the gesture, and I appreciate you coming by the office. I read the card, and it was very nice, and thank you for doing so. Again, you know, if it's the lavender tea, my wife says she'll drink it. She's yelling at me. All right. We already did this one for the mastermind. All right. Legend. The signing of the Clarity Act is a distraction by the elites, question mark. The CFTC, the SEC, and the OCC are passing individual laws in parallel. Not really laws, it's just guidance around this asset class. Starting in 2025, the reverse carry trade will happen before the FIFA Cup, or is it better to do it during the FIFA and use it as a distraction? Ooh, I'm not sure when the FIFA Cup is. Let me take a look here. FIFA Cup. It's July 11th through July 19th this year. I mean, like I said, the OCC can come out at any point before July 18th and regulate stablecoins, and I think that's what we're waiting on, for them to be able to unwind the reverse carry trade so that we can see, you know, or have the ability to stabilize the bond market. We have to be able to issue stablecoins at scale here domestically in the US in order to be able to absorb the treasuries that are going to flow onto the market during that period of time. So, you know, again, I tend to feel like likely prior to those dates, we're going to see it. But again, could be wrong. It's hard to time anything in this market. We already did that one. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and try to work my way back up. I'm probably not going to get to all the super chats tonight. And again, appreciate everybody that does that. My wife will get them either through DM if you want to send them that way, or if you want to email them to info@digitalfamilyoffice.io, we will get them that way as well. Rich Gilbert, he says, thoughts on the Harbinger setting precedent in Japan ahead of the FACE Act, fintechs like Google, Amazon, Meta, and SBI with Visa offering 10% XRP rewards. Then they do it in the US once legal. highly doubt anybody will be paying any rewards in XRP post price appreciation or implementation of this technology. I think it's going to be way too valuable as the backbone of the financial system for people to pay rewards in it. We, might look at doing that through our connection with Uphold if we have that capability or possibility. But outside of that, I don't think that any banks or institutions are going to be doling out XRP to any of their users. Fresco says, hey, Jake, with people with special needs with exposure to crypto need protection too. So I'm wondering, does Digital Ascension Group create special needs trust? We sure do. To help people with special needs protect their crypto and government assistance. Yeah, so if you're on SSI, we can set up a special needs trust for yourself or for your children if they're in that situation, to make sure that they're able to navigate that and continue to be able to get their help so that they don't lose that if they get too much income. And Dan Plaskett on the estate planning side helps navigate all of that for our clients. We also are bringing on some other help for him, which is good. And yeah, we would love to work with you in that capacity if that's something that you are interested in. All right. KT Baby. Hey, ma'am. She says, Jake, so if you're going to take a victory vacation before or after July, and Rick Johnson, my tires are doing just fine. Thanks for asking. There's a lot of banter between those two on here. We were talking about going on vacation a little bit earlier today, to be honest with you. Been traveling a lot. And, my wife has other obligations and things that she does. And so it's hard to find a window where we're both free to be able to go somewhere. I don't know that we'll be able to make it happen. I don't know. I only have a few free weeks, and so does she. So we're still working through that. But post price appreciation, yeah, there's a lot of places that are on the list for sure. Comcoff says, dude, I pray for you and your family. Thank you, man. I appreciate the prayers. He said, I can't imagine you juggling all this. Thank your wife for us. She's a trooper. She is a trooper. She holds it down while I'm traveling and trying to get deals done and making the connections we need to be able to scale the business. Very grateful for her. She deals with a lot, and she says, cramping my style, killing my vibes. She's a firecracker, but she does help us out a lot. Me in particular, definitely couldn't do any of this without her. So she is much appreciated. Let's see here. We got Carlos Campos. He says, hey, Jake, you said the BOJ did 5 interventions, but Gemini says they only did 2 in 2026, spending $63 billion over April and May. Can you clarify? Thanks. If you look at the chart, there's been 5. So I don't know, again, like you can literally look at the chart and see the sharp red lines down where they intervened in the market, and you can count 5. So if Gemini wants to say, or ChatGPT wants to say, or any of these other, LLMs want to chime in, they can absolutely do that. I would prefer to look with my eyes and see how many times they've intervened versus just rely on a Google search or an LLM to tell me. Even though those are great tools, I'm not saying not to use them. I'm just saying you should oftentimes fact check them because they do hallucinate. And if you were to go back to that LLM after it gave you that first one and say, I don't think so, I think there's been 5, you should look at the chart. I bet it'll go, oh, yeah, actually, you're right. I do see 5 large lines here that show that there could have been interventions during those situations. And it likely was 5 times in that period of time. Sometimes you just have to put them in their place and correct them when they're wrong. I have to do that probably 2 out of 10 questions that I ask an LLM. Sometimes I'll ask an LLM that I already know a question that I already know the answer to, and depending on how they answer it, I'll make sure that it understands what the actual situation is. Fresco GP says, how does Digital Ascension Group create or work with special needs trust, which is specific to clients with disabilities to protect their government assistance? We just went over that. We have Dan Plaskett, who's our architect or chief architect for the estate planning side on the more complex trusts. And he's been doing this for 45 years. And he will craft that for you. We have language to be able to build into that type of trust to be able to help facilitate that and structure it the right way so that you don't lose that SSI if you're in that situation, or your child is in that situation, or grandchild. Nancy, hey ma'am, she says, thank you for all that you do for us, Jake and the Tea Lady. Hope to meet her. I'm sure that you will if you come to our events. She said, we met with our new rep, Tyler, at DWP, and he was great. Looking forward to seeing plans for our family come to fruition. God bless. God bless you. Thank you for the kind words and support, and we're really excited to have you as clients. So, yeah, I'm sure you will see my wife at one of the events if you attend those. Again, if you want to join the mastermind, we'd love to have you there. We have lots of in-person events. We do them all across the country as we're traveling or with working with different parties. The last one was in Miami. We did that with 3IQ, Bitnomial, and with Canary Capital. Shout out to Steve and the guys over there. Kala Quantum says, hi, Jake. Quantum Girly here. Kayla Quantum. Okay. Sorry, I butchered that. I'm bad. I appreciate you letting me know. She says, invite for all of us to hold space immediately live to envision XRP at $1,000 when we chose to approach our field in a positive coherence. Old patterns die. Love to all. Thank you, ma'am. I completely believe in manifestation, and I believe if there is a large enough majority of the population that believes a certain outcome will transpire, that it definitely takes place. It's weird how the quantum field works like that. So I love that and appreciate the high vibrations in the chat. We got WizFit66. They say, hey, Jake, Carbon One and DWP member with an LLC and trust. Should I put my existing whole life policy and simple IRA in the trust to help mitigate taxes, post price appreciation, or should I keep those things separate and open for other policies? Should I do this now or wait till price appreciation? Whew. That's a lot, WizFit. So simple IRA, an IRA is an individual retirement account. You wouldn't put that in an LLC or a trust. I guess you could set up an IRA, trust, or LLC, but with it being a simple IRA, I don't know if you can make that conversion. When it comes to the whole life policy, it would depend on, I assume that whole life policy is on you. You could make a trust the beneficiary of the whole life policy. And then that way, those assets would skip, passing and taxes that would flow into the trust. So that would be the one consideration based on what you stated there that I would look through. It may or may not be the right choice. Depends on what type of trust you have set up. It sounds like you set up the revocable living trust with us, which could be the beneficiary of that insurance policy. However, you might look at an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust. I would talk to Dan Plaskett about those things, and he can help you kind of navigate that in the best manner that's, the right thing for you. I don't have enough context about your entire, long-term goals, your age, your kids, all the other things that would kind of factor into what would be the best way to orchestrate that. And if you're able to work with him and provide that information, again, like I've said many times, I know enough to be dangerous. He knows everything in and out, tax code, and how these entities are structured, language in the trust and how to structure that the right way, which policies and things are right at the right time. What he's built for us and what we went over on the most recent webinar that we put together for high net worth individuals invested in crypto is how he's married a dynasty trust with an intentionally defective grantor trust, and then added digital asset, transfer trust provisions in there. It is the most robust document built for digital assets, how to protect those. So, again, that's an irrevocable trust. It's not a life insurance trust. So I reach out to Dan. His email, just reach out to info@digitalfamilyoffice.io and they can connect you with Dan to be able to help you navigate what to do with all of that. And again, excited to have you in the group. Thank you for working with us. Blessed and grateful for the opportunity. And thank you again for the super chat and the kind words. Patience First says, hey, Jake, what price is the minimum that the DTCC needs for XRP to be before they start small scale in July? So the small scale is tokenization of ETFs. Real-time settlement moving to T+0 is still usable on the entire back end of the stock market, irrespective of tokenization of the ETFs or other stocks themselves. So that would be the total volume, $4 quadrillion a year that the back end of the stock market settles. Depending on how much XRP is available for that application and how much Project Ion is using, very confident in 3 to 4 digits. Again, you've got to have the macro events play out and other catalysts to be able to drive it to that price for them to be able to use it for that certain purpose. But that is the math and how it works. Again, depending on how much XRP is available for that application, that's the price point that I think it needs to be. Apollo Jets, he says, another question for you. If I were to relocate 50,000 XRP to DVP in the rare event that the government were to attempt to confiscate or buy back, etc., XRP from retail investors, how would that play out? Well, we would recommend that you would structure an LLC if you had that much. The government's not going to confiscate XRP or digital assets from organizations or companies. So you would be just fine. Not going to have that issue. But you would also have to sign to be able to move those assets. We can only send it to whitelisted wallets that are approved by you as the, for the benefit of on the account. So there's no way that the government could come in and say, hey, we're going to confiscate this crypto and you got to send it to this address. We literally can't do that because we can't whitelist wallets on your behalf. You have to be the one to do that. So all that being said, not really a concern I have. I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they need our XRP. But, between having it in an LLC or corporation and also having it at Anchorage and parked with Digital Wealth Partners, not going to be able to get it. Government's, too bad, so sad. And if you want the additional protections, again, the irrevocable trust that we have set up, even if it's custodied at Anchorage, it could be moved to a trust in the Cook Islands, which the U.S. government has never penetrated. And we can help you structure that if you are concerned about those things. So if you wanted like 5-6 layers of protection, we can make sure that it's set up. Mr. Watkins says, Jake, much respect. Can you do a 90-second deep dive on Fortis XI, a single asset liquidity pool paying 18 to 26% APY on idle coins like XRP, Solana, Bitcoin, HBAR? Is something like that safe to earn on? I don't know what it is, so let me start there. I've never looked at it. Haven't had any conversations with them on the institutional side, so that gives me pause because we've talked to everybody that's doing anything legitimate. Not to say if they're offshore that they're not doing things that are legitimate, but I mean, we've even had conversations with Doppler and Midas and everybody else that's offshore doing their stuff. So for me to have never heard of it gives me pause. Again, not saying that it's illegal or a Ponzi or that they're doing anything malicious, those type of returns can be generated. You would be doing like predatory lending or MCA loans or something of that nature to be able to generate that type of return, to be able to pass that much to the investors in the pool on a regular basis. It's possible. I've seen it. Probably not something I would participate in personally. That's above my risk tolerance. So I would have to do a bunch of research and due diligence before I'd be able to give you a definitive answer on it. But viscerally, it's probably higher than my personal risk tolerance. So it's not something that I would look at allocating to. Not to say that it is outside the risk tolerance of many other people in crypto. Obviously, they've gained traction in the market. It sounds like a great deal, right? Like if you could park your XRP, Solana, Bitcoin, HBAR, whatever else it was that might be idle capital with them and be able to generate those types of returns. I would want to understand how the assets are held, if they're segregated, if they're in qualified custody, if they're bankruptcy remote, how are they insured? Am I a creditor of the pool? What's the lockup period? How is the yield being generated? How are you guys underwriting the risk on the things that you're investing in order to be able to generate those types of returns? Are there rewards being paid to other people, getting people into the pool? There's just a lot of stuff that I would have to look through in order to be able to determine if I thought it was legitimate or not. But again, visceral reaction, because I haven't heard of them before and I really don't know what it is and the level of returns that they're paying out in the current market conditions, it's not something that I would personally allocate to. Christ is King. Great name. God is good all the time. He says, if I claim exemption on W-2 now to put extra money in XRP in hopes that they would get rid of the Fed, will I still owe back taxes? Bring back revolution over 2% T-tax. I mean, you can claim up to 7 on your taxes and basically not pay any W-2 employment tax, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. If you're willing to take that risk, that's on you. It's not something that I would personally do. Again, I'm with everybody else. I would love the IRS to just go away. I think that the Treasury is going to take over and issue new money. Even Warsh has talked about consolidating the Fed's balance sheet and the Treasury moving to being able to issue the currency for the U.S. So I have a lot of hope for that. However, I don't think taxes are just going to be relegated to a thing of the past. I think that they'll be reduced over time as they roll out AI and GDP increases exponentially. They'll be paying UBI to people. They'll be, Bezos came out yesterday and said, lower wage earners shouldn't be taxed. I would agree with him. I think that tax is way too high for people that are earning less than like $150,000 a year. I think it's very difficult to live on less than that, especially if you're, a married couple earning that much, depending on what part of the country you're in. Like, it's rough to be able to afford food and have multiple kids and pay for all the things that you're doing on that salary, especially if taxes are eating into that. So, I've said before, I think we're moving to a high universal basic income type situation. They'll be able to pay that with, the GDP that's created through the agentic economy and humanoid robots and all the other crazy futuristic stuff that's actually going to exist in the not too distant future. And again, hopefully the IRS goes away and, we have self-sustaining systems that are able to generate enough revenue to be able to pay out Social Security without continued contributions, tariffs, and other mechanisms to be able to generate that as well. But until that's the case, I'm not going to skirt the IRS. That's how you go to jail. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. You could take the gamble. Again, probably you should talk with a CPA. It's probably what I should tell you. I getting it. 310 says, Mr. Jakester, Beyond Broke Mastermind here. There is no better community out there. Just want to say appreciate all the mods, Living Legacy, Till Valhalla, etc. You're such a genuine dude. It's definitely appreciated. Thank you, man. I agree with you. You know, I have a strong bias and affinity for the mastermind. But you know, all that being said, I wouldn't, it's surreal to see it come to fruition like it has and see the culture that's been built there. I'm at a loss for words most times. So many people want to help other people navigate things. That we have the Learn, Do, Teach model. We're rolling out other courses. And we have so many good-hearted people that want to create change in society and leave impacts and legacies for, you know, whatever cause or charity or whatever they want to set up. I think that that's going to, again, I've said this before on the live stream, but I'm pretty confident that that's going to be the biggest legacy of the mastermind is all the philanthropic organizations and great good that people there in the group are going to do. So thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for advocating for it. And again, if any of that resonates with you and you want to check it out, try it. Month to month, no contract, cancel anytime. You can use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized #1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2 over there at the BeyondBroke mastermind.com. XRP Cars says, Jake, any updates with Uphold? Because I'm still waiting on the LLC to be able to finalize. Your LLC is finalized, by the way. If you filed for the LLC, like that part's done. There is a bug in the app that we discovered today that still shows pending for some people's LLCs. So that's our bad on that. We've got a fix being pushed for that. So you'll be able to access all your documents and do all that. The only thing that you're talking about here, and that's the next question, says, can I buy XRP through DAG indirectly instead of Robinhood? Yes, you can. As soon as Uphold goes through the KYB, we have a little over 1,000 counts that have currently, you know, made it through that process and have that trading capability enabled in the application. Again, I'm very sorry for the delay. I appreciate your patience and grace in the process. Uphold was extremely overwhelmed, even though we told them you're going to see a significant volume of people move through the app in the first couple weeks. And they were like, yeah, we hear that all the time. And then it did. And they were like, oh no, crap. So they're doing great. They're finally getting through the backlog and slogging through it. I appreciate all their help on it. So if you haven't been approved yet, I would expect to be approved in the next 7 to 10 days. I know that's a long time. And again, we're doing everything we can to push that along as fast as we can. They're building systems. They have all of their entire compliance team reviewing our KYBs to like get people through the pipeline. So as soon as that's available, yes, you will be able to purchase at a lesser cost than what it costs you on Uphold or pretty much any other retail application out there to be able to buy XRP inside the app. I can't say when. Christ is king. Again, like I said, I feel like that's going to happen before the tokenization of the stock market. So if that gives you a time frame, you know, and again, that's just my best guess. This person says, what would limit XRP to be used only around 10 times a day instead of 28,000 times Gemini says it can do? Again, go talk to Robbie Mitchnick. You know, I don't know the answer. I'm going off of what he stated in the past. There's other things that David Schwartz has stated in the past. I'm going to go with the people that built the network that know how all this stuff works. I know, again, like I've said many times, I know enough to be dangerous. I am not a coder. I have not, you know, been able to like rewrite the XRPL and understand every little intricacy in it or why organizations are limited in their capacity to use it, you know, over a certain duration of time. For his calculator to show that number, and that was the max you could push it to, until I interview Robbie Mitchnick and get to talk to him in person and ask him that question, I don't know the answer. I'm just going off of, you know, again, the guy that's the head of the digital asset division at BlackRock and what he put together. And again, LLMs can say whatever they want. They are not the end all be all. They are a great tool, but they, you should still continue to question some of the information that's being provided to you through them, because it's not always accurate. It's about 80%, 85% accurate. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it after this one, probably. Stuart, Turkey Link. He says, random question, just curious. Are you and the tea lady different from different parts of Texas? Her accent sounds much more classic Texan to an outsider. I don't want to not really. So when we were both young, we were actually in the same city. And then she moved further out East Texas and grew up there. I stayed, closer to Dallas. Depending on who I'm around, I have a deep twang, so, on here, this is how I talk most of the time. But if I'm around my wife, or if we're at a rodeo, and I'm around the right people, I definitely get a lot more Texan with my accent, than what I share on here. So, yeah, that would be all I could say to it. Is a little bit. I mean, just like I guess it's kind of like if you were in like different parts of New York and you're from New York, you can tell what street somebody grew up on. Same thing in like Europe. There's kind of like little sects or areas that have just certain words or ways that they say things that are different, even just a few streets or blocks over from one another. So yeah, maybe that's the difference there, as well as just the geographical difference in where we grew up here in the great state of Texas. What are your thoughts on dinar, hold or pass? People aren't going to like my answer on this one. I've said this before, and we have a lot of clients that hold a lot of dinar and Zong and Dim. Look, I hope you guys are right. I hope you'll make so much money, and I am just ignorant and I completely passed on it. And it gets revalued in the same way that people think it's going to. I look at history in the past and how this stuff's gone, and when there's revaluations on currency, they issue new currency, and there's an exchange rate from the old currency to the new one. I would love that not to be the case with the dinar. I would love them to just back it with oil and the price to skyrocket in comparison to everybody else, and people that are holding that currency make a ton of money. Because again, like a ton of our clients hold significant allocations to it. So for me, I don't personally have any exposure. I think it's going to go a way that a lot of people aren't hoping for. But again, I would love to be wrong about that, and just I'm okay with the XRP exposure that I have. That's my game. I know that I missed some super chats here. Oh man. All right, we got 6 minutes. I'm going to rapid fire these because there's some good ones. APMM says, God bless you, sir. Guide to how to protect your crypto against future threat. What silly things people do and loss all. With due respect, we hope you will stay on the right side if they come to buy your integrity. I don't know who they is, but if they show up, I will tell them what for. Cody, he says, I got HBAR, XRP, Tau, VVV, ICP, ZBEC, Caspa, and Monad. HBAR worth holding. Thinking about selling for more XRP. XRP feels higher ROI. Thoughts? I think XRP is a higher ROI than anything else you're holding, personally. ICP has a big all-time high. I don't know what VVV is. Tau's got BitTensor. I know people have gone to go work for that deal and then change positions. Not to say that it's not good. It's just not my cup of tea. ZBEC, I think, has a very niche application for payrolls. It's great, but I just don't know that the price appreciation is going to be there in the capacity that a lot of people are hoping for. Caspa, that's another one I'm like, I don't know. I don't know enough about it to really comment one way or the other. Same thing with Monad. So out of the ones that you have, I would be the biggest advocate for XRP and HBAR personally. Again, this is just one man's opinion. You should probably listen to a bunch of other people to come to your own conclusions. It sounds like you have. Again, can't give you financial advice. If you are diversified like you are, it's probably good to have exposure across the board. If you have uncertainties about which one of these is going to be the thing, or which ones are going to work out and which ones aren't. And so, you're probably doing the right thing for you and your financial position, just based on, the allocations that you have. I think you condensed it pretty well. It's not like you have 50 different cryptos. It sounds like you've gone deep on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positions. I did really well on 13 positions in 2020 and 2021. And I think I was over diversified during that period. So, yeah, that's my thoughts there. And then Cosmic Wind and Fire. Actually, sorry, Cosmic Fire Within. Excuse me. They say, hey, Jake, just curious how we get institutional adoption for XRP. Won't the banks use Ripple's stablecoin? Ripple states its main thing to sell XRP to fund operations, just trying to make sense of all these coins. You know what? There will be a video that's released here in the next 3 to 5 days that explains all that. It'll be out on the channel. It's XRP versus RLUSD. And it'll give you a full sense of what those two do and why one would be used over the other. In short answer, what I'll say is there's counterparty risk with Ripple. Banks and institutions don't want to make Ripple rich. They want to make themselves rich. They're going to issue their own stable coins. They're not going to want to hold Ripple's stable coin. Smaller banks and regional banks and some others might be willing to leverage Ripple's infrastructure and utilize their tokens for different applications because they don't want to have to deal with the additional complexity, and they may not have the money to buy the treasuries to be able to issue their own stable coins. Large-scale institutions are absolutely going to issue their own stable coins and do not want to work with Ripple in that capacity. But they need interoperability, and if somebody wants RLUSD on the other side of the transaction and JP Morgan wants to send them money, they need to be able to route that through a DEX, which is XRP. So XRP will absolutely be used. If it's not, then they're just going to have an exacerbation of the Nostro Vostro accounts globally. Instead of $27 trillion locked up, you're going to have like $50 or $60 trillion locked up. The whole point is to unlock that capital, not lock up more. So banks don't want counterparty risk, and they also want to enrich themselves by holding the treasuries and issuing their own stable coins. So no, unless they don't have the capability to do either of those things, or they want to work with Ripple because they don't have either of those things, then they're going to be doing it themselves, and they would just settle through XRP and not utilize RLUSD. All right. That is going to be all I have time for tonight. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your Wednesday to come hang out with me. Hopefully this was valuable for you. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Again, trying to get over 200,000 here on YouTube. If you want to join the mastermind, you like this, but you want more in-depth analysis, you want some of the behind the scenes stuff, private events, private deals, financial education, and much, much more. You can go check that out. It is at beyondbroke.com. You can use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, #1, and then MO like Mary Oscar gets you the first month for $2 there in the group. And then if you would like the LLC to be able to manage your digital assets, have the anonymity, creditor protection, and you want it all set up and done the right way in order to be able to maintain that, you can work with us. All you got to do is download, it's a web app. Go to app.digitalascensiongroup.com, set up the LLC, upload your LLC, get a bank account there through Uphold or the trading functionality. 1% on trading fees with no spread, cheapest out there. And then last but not least, if you have over 50,000 XRP or at least $100,000 in digital assets and you want access to institutional custody, You want an advisor, you want access to lending, you want access to other products and solutions to be able to generate returns on your XRP, all you got to do is go to digitalwealthpartners.net and go to the contact us form, fill that out, and one of our advisors will reach out. Again, thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday. Hopefully you guys have a wonderful week, a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on the next one.